Magnus Carlsen sacrifices his queen on move 8 in this match against Anish Giri. It goes all the way till the end game. The technique is stunning, and I'll let you decide if this is the best queen sacrifice that you've seen out of Magnus. The match starts out with the Sicilian defense, e4, c5. Anish develops his knight normally. Magnus does the same. And then Anish brings his bishop out to b5. Very similar to the Roy Lopez in the e4, e5 opening. You're putting some pressure on this knight, except in this case, oftentimes you'll see white take here because these double pawns can be a bit awkward for black. So Magnus just ignores this for now. Not much he could do anyway. Just plays e6. Anish castles. Magnus now connects his knights, just a general improving move, and then Anish opens the center, which makes sense. He's castled, his king is very safe, whereas Magnus is kind of delaying his king here for a bit. So we get an exchange in the center, they recapture, and Magnus swings his queen out to b6 here, and the tactical threat is if you take the knight, you can then take the bishop. Anish plays a tricky move here. So he brings his bishop out, and the idea is if you take the knight, which Magnus does, this knight is now pinned, and he can win it right back if you play a4, but this is move 8 of the match. Here comes the queen sacrifice. Magnus just ignores this pin completely and takes the bishop. Now, the reason this works is because white will recapture the bishop, and Magnus recaptures back. So it looks like he's getting 2 pieces for the queen, which is pretty bad, but this pawn is actually pinned. Now that everything's cleared out, we have this stare off with the rooks, so white can't recapture with the knight. By the time white develops his pieces, Magnus can retreat, so now it's 3 pieces for a queen. Now, if we rewind to the critical point where Magnus sacrifices his queen, you can see from the engine that it's not impressed. It's plus 1.6. White is meant to have a big advantage here, but I think what Magnus was going for is Anish is known for such great theoretical knowledge, so he wanted to throw him out of theory, get this crazy imbalanced position, and we're going to see it works out pretty well for Magnus. At the same time, if you keep an eye on the engine, so take, white's advantage is still good. The problem here is Anish just plays too passively, and instantly all that advantage is gone, and it's pretty equal. What Anish needed to do here was play very aggressively. Black's king is still in the center, so the top engine moves are queen f3, even h4, which is pretty explosive, or even just centralizing the rook. This knight is just a bit too far away to really make anything happen. Anish needed to act a lot quicker and failed to do so. So Magnus starts to consolidate. Anish pushes his pawn forward, but it gives this beautiful square on f5 for the knight. Anish tries to activate this knight, but like we were talking about, this knight is not going to do enough by itself. Even if it is heading for this square, Magnus can just move his knight. Now the bishop can trade their worst case, and you can see from the engine now Magnus is actually slightly ahead even without a queen. Anish's next move is to address this knight, which is definitely Magnus's best piece, so he plays the aggressive g4. Now this looks a little crazy. Anish is pushing pieces or pawns in front of his king, but Magnus really does not have the firepower to punish this in the slightest. He has no queen. His most developed piece is this knight that can't do everything by itself. So Magnus fearlessly jumps his knight forward still, gaining ground. Anish continues to push pawns, maybe hoping for a world where this rook gets a bit more active. And now Magnus strikes h5. This game probably looks nothing like the games at your level. I know I never see or play like this, but the idea, what Magnus wants to do is trade off, and now he has his rook active, even though he hasn't castled. So Magnus is probably going to stay in the center, just pretty relaxed with his king, but there's a big problem in Magnus's position, and that problem is the light squared bishop. Now this light squared bishop has nowhere to go. It is buried by its own pawns. It can't go this way, because Magnus can't push his b pawn. It's controlled by this pawn here. And it can't go this way either, because this d pawn is being restricted by this knight and the pawn. So this bishop has nowhere to go. It is the biggest problem in Magnus's position. So what he does is just sacrifice a pawn. Even though it looked like this move was impossible, Magnus decides it's worth it to completely sacrifice a pawn and to have this very advanced d pawn for white, just so this bishop can at least do something in this game. So before he does that, Magnus decides to activate his rook along the a file. Again, just a crazy move. Normally you see these rooks sliding horizontally, but Magnus has better plans. You can see how active this rook can be sliding along here either way. And here comes the pawn storm from white. Maybe trying to support this d-pawn, maybe just limiting the space for the rook. The rook would have loved to go to this square to harass the queen. And now Magnus strikes on the other side of the board. This game is still looking absolutely ridiculous. Now, what this pawn push does is it attacks the knight, and Anish is a bit stubborn here. He doesn't want to take with the g-pawn, allowing Magnus to either kick this knight away again with the pawn or activate his rook. He actually finds the best move here, to his credit, which is this ridiculous line. He plays b4. Now, this is just a straight up pawn sacrifice. There's actually just a free pawn for Magnus, but the idea behind it is Anish still does not want to move this knight just yet. He then plays d7 check, sacrificing a second pawn. Magnus is forced to take, now with that bishop that he opened up earlier, and now we see exactly what Anish was after. He jumps in with the knight. It's a check, so Magnus responds by capturing the knight, and now this queen is very active. Anish is going for checkmate. Now, Magnus is going to have to make some very accurate moves here, or this game is about to be over. He starts by jumping his knight back, bringing the pieces closer to the king, and Anish makes a big blunder here, and it looks so natural. He just moves his rook to the e-file, threatening to take this pawn, just accumulating this pressure. But the problem is, there is this very strong move, Bishop c8, retreating back to its home square, and now these two critical squares for this queen to infiltrate are covered by Magnus's pieces. What Anish had to find here was rook c7, stopping that bishop from going back and then bringing the pieces into the party. But he made his mistake. He's playing on from here. He plays g5, closing down the king side and maybe advancing this pawn to get some checkmating threats on f7. So Magnus stops that by dropping his knight back, just getting it in the way of the pawn for now. And now Anish gets ready to double his rooks on the d-file. Now, you may still be wondering, why was Anish's blunder here, moving his rook to the e-file, so bad? And it's because you'll see Magnus just makes this beautiful, impenetrable fortress. So he starts out by moving his king to f7, and Anish decides, instead of doubling, it's a bit too slow, decides to throw in this check, but Magnus now brings his knight back, and you can see just how compact this king is, surrounded by its pieces. Everything is defending each other. It is beautifully done from Magnus. Anish tries to prod, offers the exchange of rooks, which Magnus accepts, and now Magnus starts to clean up these pawns. Now, these pawns were the last big problem in Magnus's position. Maybe if there was a world where this queen could eliminate all these pawns, he could get an extra queen and win. But what you're about to see is Anish just continue to shuffle. Magnus decides to sacrifice that piece temporarily to get the square for the bishop. And Magnus is just going to kind of make a cube here. Again, everything is surrounding the king. All the pawns get traded on the other side of the board. And you can see Magnus is just going to use the harmony of his pieces so beautifully here to eventually win this game. So Anish tries to make something happen here. Moves his rook, attacks the knight, but Magnus first counterattacks the queen. Queen has to move, and then just drops his knight back. Still, everything is beautifully defended. Anish moves his king up, and then what Magnus does here is moves the bishop, attacks here, rook has to move, and then the rook comes back in. This is a theme from this game. We've seen this a few times. Magnus is clearing the way for one of his other pieces to take that spot. So now the rook comes. This is great. Everything is still so close to this king. This bishop will eventually find a home somewhere that is defended. You just know Magnus has been so clinical in these spots. He is continuing to just improve his rook. These rooks are shuffling. Bishop comes back. Rook comes back. Magnus wins that pawn. And with that, you can see it's going to be so tough now. All these pieces are so clustered together. And these pawns are going to start running up the board now as well. Now, I think you get the idea of Magnus's strategy now, because it is just going to be more of the same. This queen and rook can't do anything together. So Anish keeps trying to poke and prod, but Magnus just does it better. And with every chance, once he gets a moment, pushes his pawn. It does start to open up this king, but as long as this bishop is on this diagonal, Magnus has nothing to worry about, continues to shuffle his pieces, continues to push the pawn. Again, still everything so well defended, everything so compact. Magnus is making no mistakes. The rook is behind the pawn. He can't even block here because the bishop would come and take it. So with more shuffling, Magnus eventually queens, and Anish is forced to resign the game. So let me know in the comments if this is the best queen sacrifice from Magnus you've seen. If it's not, let me know. I'd love to check out the other matches. Other than that, thanks for watching till the end. Above me should be a video that YouTube thinks you'll enjoy, so check that out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.